The Atlas Tesla Model 3 and Y tilting screen mount from Tech Forum. I can't say enough good things about it. And just when I thought it couldn't get any better, Matt from Tech Forum developed the Atlas Plus. I'm Frugal Tesla Guy, and I was able to get my hands on one for a review, and spoiler alert, it's pretty awesome. Now, first and foremost, if this is the first time you're hearing of a tilting screen mount for your Model 3 or Y and are seriously considering getting one, I want you to stop watching right now and watch my comparison between the Tech Forum Atlas mount and the Chinese knockoff. Trust me, I'll be glad you did. Then I want you to come right back here to see the improvements that were made to the Atlas mount. In November of 2019, I was fortunate enough to be contacted by Matt from Tech Forum to try out his first generation tilting screen mount for my Tesla Model 3. Now, this was the only one of its kind at the time, and I absolutely loved it. The only thing missing from this mount was that you couldn't freely move the screen. Although you could adjust the angle any way you wanted, it still was in a fixed position. Now, a little over a year later, he changed that with his second generation mount that allowed you to freely tilt the screen left and right, but not up and down for the pitch. Fast forward about 8 months later, in December of 2020, when Matt developed his third generation 2-axis mount called Atlas, allowing you to adjust it left and right and the pitch up and down. After listening to requests from his customers and testers, there were two things he wanted to address with his Atlas mount. Now, some of his taller customers, and in particular Model Y customers, didn't like how close the screen was to their knee. Secondly, many people didn't like the fact that the steering wheel covered a portion of the bottom left corner of the screen. So, upon developing the Atlas Plus mount, he was able to raise the screen 1/2 of an inch higher and moved it to the right about 3/4 of an inch. This solved the problem for his taller customers and also put the bottom left corner of the screen in full view. Now, on top of that, he was able to bring the screen even closer to the driver by stepping it away from the dash. Now, once I installed the Atlas Plus mount, I immediately noticed all of these improvements. It is without a doubt sitting noticeably higher up on the dash, making my knee feel a lot less cramped. Of course, moving the screen over 3/4 of an inch to the right also helped in that department. I also noticed just how much closer it is to me, making it even easier to access the screen, and I don't have to reach nearly as far for all areas of the screen, including the right side. And now the entire bottom left corner of the screen is no longer hidden by the steering wheel. Once again, thanks to the movement of the screen to the right. Now, before I installed the first generation mount, I took some measurements of how far the screen was from the dash, the center console, and from the steering wheel. So let's compare the two. And to try to make it as accurate as possible, I put the Atlas Plus mount in the center position and tried to match the pitch angle as close as I could based on the OEM mount picture. Now, the OEM mount is 7.5 inches from the dash, and the Atlas Plus mount takes the screen 2 more inches from the dash at 9.5 inches. The bottom of the screen on the OEM mount is 7.25 inches from the center console, and the Atlas Plus mount is only 1/4 of an inch lower at 7 inches. The bottom left corner of the screen on the OEM mount is 6.25 inches from the steering wheel, and as expected, the Atlas Plus mount is 2 inches closer at 4.25 inches. Now, that may seem close, but upon sitting in my car, my knee is nowhere near the screen, and by the time I tilt the screen to the position I like, it actually pushes it back about 2 inches, bringing it closer to the original OEM distance. Now, how does it look? Well, quite honestly, no mount on the market is going to look as clean as the OEM mount. Now, since the Atlas Plus is even farther away from the dash, it's going to be more difficult to completely cover up. The first and second generations were covered up with a shroud, and was a great solution in my opinion. But once there was more movement in the swivel, both left and right and up and down, it was difficult to keep the shroud in place. Now, the plastic cover can only cover so much before you start losing your range of motion, and in a sense, defeating the purpose. So once all is said and done, you end up with parts of the bracket exposed, including the wire harness from the screen to the computer. Now the Atlas is a little more discreet, but the Atlas Plus is without a doubt more noticeable and may be a deal breaker for some. For me and many others, it's not. The trade-off is the overall improvement of the screen position, along with the fact that I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall with long legs and can appreciate having more room for my knee. Now, as I mentioned in my very first video with the first generation mount, the tilted screen ties everything together for the driver. From the steering wheel, the left and right stalks, tilting the screen and bringing it closer really improves the overall experience when driving the Tesla Model 3 and Y. It feels much more ergonomic and just feels right. In fact, anytime I see a Model 3 or Y without a tilting screen, it doesn't look right to me and feels less natural, especially on the driver's side. Now, as for the passenger, it does feel a little less inviting, especially since I like to have it tilted pretty far to the left. So on long road trips, I do move it a little to the right for the passenger as a courtesy. So I guess the question now is, which mount is right for you? The Atlas or the Atlas Plus? Well, if aesthetics are more important to you and you are a shorter driver, then the Atlas mount might be the one for you. It still has all of the great functionality as the Atlas Plus. It just sits closer to the dash, and the plastic cover does a better job in concealing the mount. Now keep in mind, my Atlas mount is chrome, but all of the new Atlas mounts are now black, helping it to blend in better with the cover. Now the only disadvantage I can think of is the bottom left corner of the screen is covered by the steering wheel. Now if you're a taller driver, then the Atlas Plus mount just might be the one for you. Not only does it give your knee more room, but it also has an even bigger range of motion. You'll also like having the screen closer for better accessibility. However, by taking it back from the dash, you will see more of the mount and the wire harness from the back of the screen to the computer. So let's talk price. The Atlas mount for both the 3 and Y is $355, and the Atlas Plus mount is $395. But if you use my discount code FTG35 at checkout, you'll get $35 off the price, bringing the Atlas mount down to $320 and the Atlas Plus mount down to $360. As usual, I am thoroughly impressed with what Matt from TechForum has done with the Atlas Plus mount. I was already perfectly happy with the Atlas, but as a tall driver, I do like having more knee room, and being able to see the bottom left corner of the screen is an added bonus. Well, how about you? What are your overall thoughts on this new mount? Do you have a tilting screen? If not, have you considered getting one? And if that's the case, once again, I would like to encourage you to watch my comparison video between the Atlas mount and the Chinese knockoff. They may be cheaper, but the overall quality, functionality, and feel is far inferior to that of the Atlas design, and well worth the extra cost in my opinion. I may be frugal, but I'm not cheap. Well, thank you all so much for watching, and you know the drill. Like, subscribe, and stay positively charged.